Hello, it's Larold, and this build took us several days to really bring it all together and figure out just what exactly we were trying to do, but it has been worth it. So it is a little raw, it's also very fast, very strong, and shockingly tanky. I think I've only died one time since I made the swap over to how the build is constructed now, despite doing tier 15 maps at like level 72. This is a bit of an early look at the build, because it's only hit level 90 at the time of recording, and it's really not very expensive considering how strong and fast it is. It's also very simple to gear this build, because so much of the gear that we're wearing is unique items. It's a stat stacker. There are a lot of items in this build that are actually really cheap. We're talking about a few divines in some cases, or a few exalts in some others. It really removes a lot of the guesswork of getting the character together, but then there's potential, because it is a stat stacker, to scale it to mirror tier. And that is a big part of the reason that we've put this character together in the way that we have. You can get it up and running and annihilating tier 15 content, and, kind of the basic endgame stuff, and then scale it up to infinity and beyond if you want. It's also extremely simple to play. You basically just hold down right mouse button for most of the time that you're in maps, and it'll zoom right through. It's very slightly more complicated on bosses. You press 1-2, and now the boss is dead. That's kind of it. The way they fall over instantly is very satisfying as well. So let's get into it, but first be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Join our Discord as well, we're over 1,300 members and still growing. Okay, let's go ahead and start by talking a little bit about leveling instead of how the build is currently constructed, and that's because that's the first question people are going to have, right? And this is a setup that I kind of fumbled my way into playing once again here, and I would highly recommend this for pretty much any right side of the tree character, unless you're wanting to level with bows or something. I think this is the way to do it. Pillar of the Cage God is something you can equip at level 1. You'll see it's level 30 here because of the level 30 requirement runes that I have in. But the way that it works is it basically, as you can see, it just has 3 mods, and that last mod, the increased weapon damage per 10 strength, is the reason that this is a good weapon that you can use throughout the entire campaign, and you just basically stack as much strength as you can and as much flat damage as you can. And this weapon will cause you to absolutely flatten everything throughout the campaign. Now, in terms of skill setup in the campaign, for the first handful of levels, if you're using a quarterstaff, you kind of have to use Glacial Cascade or Falling Thunder. Those are kind of the two that really work the best. And once you unlock Ice Strike at level 11 or whatever it is, that's what you're going to use for pretty much the entire rest of the campaign. Tempest Flurry is the build that we're, the skill that we're using at the end of the end game here, moving around like this pretty quickly. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible skill until you have a massive amount of attack speed, and you're not going to be able to get that during the campaign. So you just stick with Ice Strike, it's going to feel really good. Ice Strike and I like Ice Strike and Tempest Spell. Classic combo, feels really good on all the campaign bosses. That's what I would recommend doing. So in terms of getting a bunch of strength, you can get some from rares, but there are a few uniques that are just really good for that. Meganord's Girdle, some you can equip from level 1, gives you a massive amount of strength. And Greymake gives you all 3 of the primary stats, and the rolls on this are 30 to 50. You do lose 1 to all stats per level, so this is a really good helm with a pretty short expiration date, mid-30s, maybe level 40 is when you're going to want to drop this helm for literally anything else. There are definitely several other options. I think Black Sun Crest is something I didn't pull out of the stash, but it's something you can use. It's really not that amazing, but it's an option. You could also just use a rare helm, probably better defensively. There are some other gloves you can use, nothing super special. Yarn Griper are kind of, I think, a little bit bait. They allow you to use strength to satisfy other attribute requirements of melee weapons and melee skills, so you can use strength to use the Dexent skills that come with using, quarterstaff skills, Ice Strike and stuff. The issue with it is, maybe this is a bug that's been fixed, I didn't double check. You couldn't upgrade skills, so you'd have to change to a new gem every time you wanted to upgrade all of your Ice Strike and stuff. Very annoying, and also the rest of the stats on this are, they're just okay. Ultimately, I went with Grip of Winter. I thought these were kind of more fun once you get to level 11 and beyond. It just felt better anyway, more cold damage. And you can also combine that with Pulsar Keln and Herald of Ice throughout the campaign. And you will just get everything to pop, shatter, so frozen for pretty much the whole campaign. A couple of other uniques that are just good on like basically any attack-based character. Blackheart's just really good from level 1 on. You'll eventually get much better flat damage rings, and you'll want to swap over to those. Whenever you find your damage starts to like slow down a bit, it means you need more flat damage. Maybe you need to upgrade the runes in your weapon, or you need to upgrade your gloves or rings or something to get more flat damage. And then there's the Everlasting Gaze. This is just a great neck for like any build in the campaign. This is going to trivialize mana for a really long time throughout the campaign. Then as for boots, you just kind of want move speed boots, whatever. Wake of Destruction are the one pair of boots that are a little bit different because they add 1 to 48 lightning damage to attacks. That's a lot of flat damage, so I wound up wearing these, I think, into like Act 3 or maybe even part of Act 4. I think I was wearing these into Act 4 just because they had like 25 flat damage, which you're not getting anywhere. You're getting 0 damage from every other pair of boots, so that was like pretty nice. But that's kind of the only reason that they're like noteworthy. As for your passive tree while you're doing the campaign, honestly, don't worry about it too much. Like, just take a bunch of travel nodes with strength in them. It won't look like this. It'll be strength, but otherwise, just come down here, get like move speed from this bonus, get acceleration, then just kind of cruise over here and get like the stuff that increases your attributes, and kind of like set yourself up for later for doing the surrounded helm, the constricted command. Just kind of set yourself up for that later, but really just like stack a bunch of stats during the campaign. That really is all you have to do, and stacking a lot of strength does feel pretty good, and it also gives you a bunch of life, so you'll be kind of tanky. And then you won't really have to worry about resistances all that much either. Alright, now let's talk about the build. So we are using Hollow Palm Technique, which is a really interesting new keystone that was added in this patch, and what it does is it allows you to use quarterstaff skills without the weapon equipped, and then the skills gain physical damage based on the skill level, so you want to have them as high level as possible, and then you also get attack speed and flat crit chance based on the amount of evasion rating and energy shield on your armor. So we are also using a bunch of uniques in a way that slightly undermines Hollow Palm Technique, not to the point that we would like want to use Pillar of the Cage God instead of Hollow Palm Technique, though. Like, it is definitely still very good, but we're using a unique helm, Constricting Command, to get a bunch of really powerful bonuses out of being surrounded. Frantic Fighter, I like Tactical Retreat, Thrill of Battle. There's some bonuses around here. This little small passive right here is actually like a 3% damage increase, which is pretty good, better than a lot of notables. And then we're also using Hand of Wisdom in action and Astramentus. This is like a classic combo that will just instantly give you a ton of attack speed and a ton of flat lightning damage. And so a thing that's really nice about this setup is you can use a lot of these uniques. You can just start using them in the middle of the campaign. Astramentus is available at level 24. This synergizes pretty nicely with Pillar of the Cage God while you're, in the middle of like Act 2 or early Act 3 or whatever. Constricting Command, you can start using at level 38. Hand of Wisdom in action, I think, is like level 33 or something. I have a pair of those floating around that don't have Talismans of Sirius in there, and yeah, 33. So you can start combining a lot of this stuff together in the campaign, and that actually will do you very well. So one thing I did that I would say is like a big mistake is I actually leveled as an Amazon until like I got midway through the intermissions and realized like, I don't really want to play Amazon. I think I want to do Ritualist instead. So I would recommend just doing Ritualist the whole way. You get an extra ring. That's a lot more opportunity for more flat physical and flat lightning damage, flat cold damage for that matter on your rings. It's just an extra piece of gear. You get more like life and resistances and stuff. It's definitely very helpful to have that extra gear slot. And then as you like go into your second Ascendancy, you get more bonuses out of your rings and amulets. So I just generally think that if you're doing a stat stacker build, I don't think there's anything that is nearly as good as Ritualist. Ascendancy-wise in the game. I feel pretty confident about that. I like Gimling. I think that's the only one that's even remotely close, and it ain't as good. We're also using Ingenuity to juice the bonuses from our rings because we are using so many different uniques. We actually have some like issue with getting resistances up, and we're able to fix that by just having some really resistanced up rings in these Ingenuity bonus slots. And now we're fine on resistances, one short on Chaos Res, it's not too bad. And mostly what we're doing gear-wise is we're just trying to get as much evasion rating as possible on our body armor, and as much evasion rating and energy shield on our boots. I wanted to go ES and evasion rather than raw evasion. You can do raw evasion, you can do raw ES. I might try playing around with that. One thing that you could do that I think is a little cringy is instead of having move speed on your boots, you could just not, and that'll give you way more potential for having like a bunch more damage, defensive stats out of that boot slot, but you do lose move speed. So I find that to be pretty lame. I like being able to, like, you know, most of the time we're moving around with right mouse button, but at times, you know, I like being able to like walk around and not be like rude. I mean, like, look at how slow that is, right? Horrible. Feels terrible. So for me, it's kind of worth it to lose a little bit of defensive stat budget, but you know, your mileage may vary. All right, so that kind of covers gear. We're really just looking for like as much flat fizz and flat lightning as we can get on our rings, as much resistance and stats as we can get, anything that we can fill in with stat budget. Like more int is really the most important because of the way the Hand of Wisdom in action works. You know, it gives you flat lightning damage based on your int and flat attack or percent increased attack speed based on your dex. You're getting a massive more attack speed multiplier out of the body armor. Like, this is a 2600 evasion rating body armor, and we get what, 1% more attack speed per 25 item evasion rating on our equipped armor items. So we're getting, you know, over 100% more attack speed just out of the body armor, not to mention, you know, the boots giving some, and whatever, like 1% out of the gloves and 5-6% out of the helm. You know, not great out of those, but, you know, doing our best. All right, so now that we've kind of covered that part, let's talk a little bit about the passive tree. As you can see, we're kind of stretching all around the tree, just going for like a lot of different bonuses that are all at different edges of the tree, a lot of jewel sockets, and a lot of stats along the way, and we're taking int in every single point. I think that's the right approach here. Ultimately, I think int is really like what you want the most. You might be able to get like a little bit more sheet DPS out of having more dexterity, more move speed out of having more dexterity because of more attack speed as well. But you do lose like boss slamming damage by not just having as much int as possible. So really we're just going full all in on int, and then that synergizes pretty nicely with pure power up here as well to give us like a pretty good, very downside free damage bonus. We are using a lot of interesting jewels here. We got a From Nothing with Radius of Walker of the Wilds. We are also using an Against the Darkness here, and this gem in particular, damage is extra cold and percent increased int, which is kind of cheap. It would be better if it was damage is extra lightning and increased int. That would be better, but the price would be like 10 times higher. I think you could do damage is extra fire and increased int. That could also work, but yeah, ultimately, like, this works. It's fine. You get a bit of chill here and there, which isn't a bad thing. We're not really doing anything to take advantage of that. I'm not really wanting to do Herald of Ice as well. That is maybe something you could consider, but we're not bothering with that. So because of being able to allocate everything around Walker of the Wilds, we can get the Howling Primate, we can get the Fabled Stag. These have some advantages because we are taking advantage of you know, like we're using some charges in this build. That's going to give us some extra damage as well, and just some extra stat budget out of these two. And then the main appeal here is Dizzying Hits and Stupefy, and being able to take Material Solidification for like a pretty good chunk of extra damage as well. 8% extra damage is really quite good. And this Against the Darkness bonus, you know, if we took this out, we lose like 20% damage because it's hitting this notable, this notable, this notable, this notable, and what, these three as well. That's three, seven notables that it's hitting in this area, so like pretty good in terms of adding a lot of extra damage. We're also doing a lot of accuracy bonuses. Like, we're not really trying to do accuracy stacking like an Amazon would, but it does give us a lot of attack speed out of Falcon Dive. We get a lot of attack speed out of that, and then we also get a lot of accuracy and evasion rating out of the Winter Owl. So that's just like a good defensive bonus as well. I think I've got a Heart of the Well here with some damage that's extra lightning and max life on kill, which feels pretty nice. This one I think I got for like 2 divines. It was like a bit of a seal, but, you know, pretty good option here. And then, like I said, because we're using that constricting command, we're taking Last Stand. We're coming over here and taking Frantic Fighter and Tactical Retreat. I do actually have 1 extra point, so I'll put that into this one. It's attack damage while surrounded. You know, that's 4% extra damage. And Thrill of Battle, 20% increased attack speed while surrounded is obviously huge. And so that is like part of why this build is able to clear very quickly, is we have a ton of attack speed based on being like a combination of factors, right? We're stacking a lot of dexterity, which gives us attack speed through Hand of Wisdom in action. We're getting it from Hollow Palm technique. We're getting it also from all the bonuses that come from being surrounded. It is important on a constricting command that you have to get one that requires 5 fewer enemies to be surrounded. But that also fixes mana. You know, as you can see, we're like instantly out of mana all the time. And so what you do for that is you just put Defy onto all of your skills with one exception, and that would be Charged Staff. For whatever reason, this doesn't work with Defy. Don't know why. It is a melee skill, or an attack skill, I should say. And this supports attack skills you use yourself, makes it so you could use them even if you're out of mana. But on Charged Staff, it just doesn't work, so we have to use Life Tap. Not the end of the world. This has the added benefit of making all of our damage be lucky as well, which works really well with being a lightning-based build. I have not found a Megalomaniac or any sort of jewel to fit in Wild Storm, but obviously that would be a great way to upgrade the build. Maybe that's even just like a potential anoint option as opposed to pure power. Maybe that would actually be better. Like, that might actually be more damage. Something to consider. I think it's worse, though. It does look like it's worse, but, you know, maybe something to play around with. Because we're stacking all this in, we have all of this extra mana. It's like totally worthless to us, you know, 1338 mana. You know, we still blow through it instantly, even if we're not using the constricted command. Like, you can't actually like sustain right-clicking around maps. So because of that, we kind of want to have something to do with all of the int that we're stacking, and a great way to take advantage of that is to use Heroic Tragedy off in a quarter of the map where it's not affecting, like, because it'll convert all of the nodes in the area. You want to use it somewhere where you're not like ruining a bunch of useful nodes, and that's exactly what we're doing here. We're taking Chaos Inoculation, but we're not actually using CI. We're using this Heroic Tragedy, which is affected by Olroth, in order to convert that bonus into Nightly Tenets, and that changes the int bonus to give us increased evasion rating. And we can see here's our evasion without that, 22,000 evasion rating, 12,000 deflection, you know, not bad. And then with it, 40,000 and 22,000, now we're over 80% evade chance, over 70% deflect chance. And there's potential to scale that up quite a bit more by either taking like this bonus here, Enduring Deflection, or potentially even coming in here to Train Deflection and really pushing that way up. Definitely some options available here in the tree in terms of like stuff you could do to make yourself more tanky. Something I've been kind of playing around with as well. You can see the difference between the PoB and the in-game as I've been bouncing back and forth between using Falcon Technique or using Falcon Dive. Falcon Dive saves you a point, but then you get a little bit of dex out of Falcon Technique. I think Falcon Technique is generally worse with the amount of dex that I have currently on the character. Might be better at more, like, high budget. Alright, the final things in the tree I want to hit on are, I have a Megalomaniac with Disorientation, which gives you a bit of, like, damage against blinded enemies. This was just something that I was able to get for free that actually did anything. I don't really have a lot of sources of blind in the build, so I'm not making too much advantage or taking too much advantage of that. But the other thing was Abasement, which by default is a really worthless skill, but because of this Heroic Tragedy converting Abasement, it's actually not doing it in the PoB here, converting Abasement into this bonus, Natural Energies, a bunch of max ES, and Lightning Res. I thought, hey, that's a cool thing to pick up, and it was pretty cheap, so that's something you could play around with and just see like if there are any bonuses that with your Heroic Tragedy get converted into something that looks kind of good. You can pick up a Megalomaniac and it will work on the converted version of the skill, and then you could try and find something that kind of combos well. I'm still going to be looking for, you know, there's a lot of better options around. You know, if I could find one that does Abasement and Wild Storm, that would be the dream. That would be huge, but we haven't gotten there yet. All right, now let's talk about the Ritualist Ascendancy. So the first 2 points of the Ritualist Ascendancy, Unfurled Finger and Mystic Attunement, are insanely strong. They're probably the 2 strongest points in the entire Ascendancy tree. Like, not just a Ritualist. The only thing I can think of that's even, like, close is Titan's Hulking Form. That's maybe the only other thing that's like really comparable, but this is just insanely strong. You get an entire extra piece of gear, and it's a ring, which is a huge source of damage and defensive value. And then you get Mystic Attunement that basically turns your 3 rings and 1 amulet into 3.75 rings and 1.25 amulets. Like, it's wildly, wildly strong. Then you kind of have garbage nodes left over. You could take Intricate Sigils. This will make it so even if you just have 1 charm slot on your belt, which unfortunately I do, you still get to use 3 charms and you get a bunch more charm charges. It's not great, but it's something. You can't use Mind Phylacteries with this build because you're always going to be out of mana, and as far as I could tell, it didn't work if you're out of mana. Maybe I'm mistaken, but it did seem like it just didn't do anything. So I took Corrupted Life Force. I have not been able to tell that this Blood Boil is doing literally anything. I've been thinking about taking As the Whisper's Demand instead to give myself like an active Headhunter buff that you can use. That seems pretty bad too. I don't really know that either of these are good. I might literally just take the small passives for move speed and 1% more fizz damage. I don't know. None of these skills seem particularly good, but especially Blood Boil, you have to stand near enemies to stack Blood Boil on them, then you kill them, and then they put a dot onto nearby stuff. Everything's dead instantly. It doesn't, it's like, it's really, really terrible. But I don't know. I took it. I played around with it so far. I haven't bothered with As the Whisper's Demand because that seems slow and annoying too, but I might just try this just as like a bit of fun. So, 4th Ascendancy node, I don't really think it does much for you. You probably are better off just taking like move speed and charm charges or something. Maybe you could take the horrible extra life recovery, even though this is really, really awful as well. All right, I know one FAQ that we're gonna get is, can you do this with Amazon? Can you do this with X Ascendancy? So we're doing it with Ritualist. I really think Ritualist is the best because of the extra ring and the extra bonuses from the ring. Amazon's not bad. You know, you get like 3-something% flat crit. Like, as you can see, this is like 18% damage increase. That is pretty good. And Stalking Panther, if you set it up correctly, can be really good defensively, but it won't work with the way that we have this set up at all. So I think Amazon is bad for this particular setup. The only other Ascendancy I think is like particularly good for this is, once again, Pathfinder. The main reason that we didn't go with it is we just did a Pathfinder build that I love that build, and will be playing more of it later in the league, but doing back-to-back Pathfinder builds just felt kind of wrong. There's a lot of potential. You could maybe do some sort of concoction-related thing. I don't know about that, but being slow immune is good. Getting 6 extra passive points is good. And also Sustainable Practices is a wildly underappreciated node for an evasion stacking build. As you can see, this is just an enormous amount of effective health that you get out of Sustainable Practices. Like, if you are really stacking a lot of evasion, it is a massive damage reduction amount of that is added to your elemental damage reduction, and also the bonus on the way to it being totally ignite immune, being immune to ignited ground because of this is really, really underappreciated. So, you know, kind of think that Pathfinder is very slept on by the community at this moment, but still, Ritualist is the best for any sort of stat stacker because you get basically 2 extra pieces of gear out of the ring bonus, and then buffing the bonuses from all of your rings and amulet. Then yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that your other 2 points are like, you know, whatever, kind of a dud, but it is what it is. All right, now let's finally talk about skills. So I mentioned Blood Boil. Like I said, I mean, I put some bonuses points in here. I don't notice it at all. We're not using Staff Strike at all. You can ignore that. Tempest Flurry is our main deal. We're using this to clear through maps and move through maps very quickly, as you can see. And we have a lot of stuff that increases the attack speed of the skill, using rapid attacks and rage, both of which will give you a bunch more move speed. Rage, you'll notice that sometimes you'll hit that max of 30 rage and you'll kind of slow down a bit because the more attack speed applies only when you're not at max rage. Sometimes you'll kind of find your characters like skipping through because they're bouncing between like 28, 29, and 30. Not a big deal, it's just something you might notice. And then we're also using Rigwald's Ferocity. We are using this in Weapon Set 1. This is a pretty cheap, unique support gem, and it gives you a massive amount of attack speed if you're using it in Weapon Set 1. You know, I can swap weapons, and you can see it really slows down a lot. I'm not doing any weapon swap tech. You can, but I didn't want to play around with that yet. That's more like, you know, build update 2 or 3 kind of stuff. Then we're using Crescendo. This is not something that's mandatory. This is like the only one that's not really like mandatory in the setup. Just gives you way more clear. That final strike, you know, the one that's calling down a lightning strike here, will cleave to a bunch of nearby enemies. I think it's 2 extra enemies. And it just does, like, it has increased area of effect. It hits 30% harder. It's really, really good for doing a lot of extra damage while you're moving around a map. And then Defy is mandatory on all of these skills because of the constricting command. You know, that's the whole reason that we're even using that. So Falling Thunder we're using to kill bosses. Culmination is this really, really powerful support gem that we're able to use on a couple of different skills. Culmination makes it so that when you're hitting stuff with Tempest Flurry, you're building up combo. This will apply combo to that skill, and this skill gains 3% more damage per combo. There's no like limit on the number of stacks of combo you can build up, and so you can just build up like 700% more damage for your Falling Thunder if you can actually hit something long enough for it like to build up the stacks for it. And then we're using Fist of War 3 because we're so infrequently using Falling Thunder. You can use Fist of War 2 if you want, so that it'll ancestrally boost like every 4 seconds or whatever, but you get, you know, a big damage and an area of effect increase on your Falling Thunder, which, as you can see, casts very, very, very fast. Then also, because we're using it so infrequently, Inevitable Critical is just like really good for like juicing you. Very, very, very rarely you'll run into rares that you might want to throw a Falling Thunder into, but usually you're only going to use Falling Thunder on a boss. Then I'm using Rakiata's Flow because I had one, I stole it from my warrior, and this is really good, right? This is why we're not doing any sort of lightning resistance penetration. Like this bonus up here, Storm Surge, is really good in PoB for your Tempest Flurry damage, and you can take this, you can get Lightning Res penetration elsewhere. You could also use Rakiata's Flow instead of Crescendo. The only maps that I've run into in playing this character at all over the last couple of days that have like slowed me down at all have been like Delirium and more monster life and increased monster elemental resistances and something else like reduced extra damage taken from crits. Like it needs to be like that level of many, many, many defensive bonuses on top of a monster before I feel like I need to swap Crescendo and Rakiata's Flow at all. You can use other stuff for this, like you could just use like whatever, elemental armaments too. You could use that. You could use like a lot of different bonuses, like Overextend is another one that I kind of like. Or Close Combat's a really good one for Falling Thunder. If you don't want to use Rakiata's Flow, use Close Combat. You'll do 30% more damage for guys that you're standing right next to, which is pretty much everything you're going to hit with Falling Thunder. You're going to be right up in their face. So the way to really make Falling Thunder work and be good, though, is to have power charges. How do we get power charges? We're not doing anything passive for it. We're just using that same culmination technique of like stacking up combo in conjunction with Aelith Chimes on Hand of Chayula. So Aelith Chimes is another unique support gem that gives you a chance to get a power charge whenever you expend combo, and that chance can go above 100%. So if you're running around, you get to 10 stacks of combo, you can hit Hand of Chayula, and it'll guaranteed generate a power charge, even if it doesn't hit anything. You can just throw a Hand of Chayula at a wall, and it'll still give you those power charges. Then we use Charge Profusion to give ourselves a chance at an extra charge. And I'm using Sniper's Mark because this is a crit-based build. That's what I want to use the Hand of Chayula for. You can use Elemental Weakness. I have one in my like off gems here, but because that actually lowers your damage for Falling Thunder, I kind of don't want to do that. But it is an option again if you're not using Rakiata's Flow. That's what I would use instead of Sniper's Mark. You know, then once again, we're using Defy support, of course, so that we can actually afford to do this, and then that's kind of it for Hand of Chayula. You basically just, in maps, you just cruise around with your Tempest Flurry. When you build up enough charges, you can hit Hand of Chayula, give yourself some power charges, and then use Charge Staff, the next skill that we're actually using. So Staggering Palm, that's a thing you can use to like build up a buff ahead of time, and we got like Nova Projectiles and Stun, Proj, Acceleration, and Ricochet, and it looks fun and cool. You know, Defy, obviously, so that's usable. I don't use this at all. So this is just like bait for people who don't watch the video. Like if you're watching right now and you're actually hearing this, you know more than the people who didn't bother to watch this and who are going to ask, what about Staggering Palm? We're going to make fun of them in the comments. It's going to be a tag team effort of me and Sunset like laughing at those people. So Charge Staff is a really powerful bonus to the damage. You get like 1 to 20 added quarterstaff attack lightning damage per power charge consumed. That's why we're using 5 power charges right now. We can go up to 6 later on if we want to spec over here into Lust for Power. Don't know if it's worth it, but you can. It also adds a very fun, like, you know, lightning beams in front of you as you're zipping around, and it's just kind of something to do other than just right-mousing through every single map. You can, you know, get those power charges built up from Hand of Chayula, then use Charge Staff, and now you have a little bit more going on. That's kind of it. And then we're using Herald of Thunder, Wind Dancer, and Ghost Dance as our 3 auras. I like Ghost Dance. You know, we only have like 815 energy shield. That's the biggest thing I would like to change, but because we have so much evasion, we're getting full recovery on our energy shield. Whenever we take a hit, we're getting like 3k energy shield back. So yeah, that's pretty good. I think that might be the only thing I would want to change, is maybe just swap over to full energy shield, like try and get like 400 energy shield base boots, but that's maybe it. I kind of like getting deflection rating on the converting or whatever, deflection out of evasion on the boot suffix, and obviously that's not available from pure energy shield boots, so might just stick with these. They're pretty decent. Ultimately, that's kind of it for the build. Yeah, that's the skills, the passive tree, the ascendancy, the gems, the uniques. You know, it's like there's a lot of complexity going into the setup, and then ultimately you just kind of right mouse around and everything dies. And then when you get to a boss, you hit them with a Hand of Chayula and then throw a quick Falling Thunder into their face and they're dead. It's kind of fun to do that on like essence mobs as well. You'll right click around and, you know, hit the corrupt on them and like click them out and then Hand of Chayula, Falling Thunder, and kill them. Like it's so much faster to actually do it than to say the words of what you're doing, which is like kind of a good feeling. Very, very fast build. It was very fun to do in the campaign as well. Like Ice Strike is very fun in the campaign, and there are some other really fun skills that you can kind of use and play around with along the way. Yeah, ultimately this build really came together very, very quickly once it finally once we figured out what we were trying to do with it, and it's just really, really good. There's definitely a lot more potential to upgrade this build even further, but ultimately, this is our stat stacking Ritualist, at least the first taste of it. The build is really strong. The potential to take it to the next level is really, really high. There is an insane amount of growth potential. You know, we got a bunch of like bad suffixes on some of our gear, life regen on multiple pieces of gear. You know, we could get more rarity, we could get more life, we could get more energy shield. There's a lot of potential to scale this build up in a bunch of different ways, and I think we're both really excited with the state of the character. I know I'm excited to play a lot more of it and figure out what else we could do to get it even faster and even stronger. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and join the Skipping Sleep Studio Discord and become part of our community. It's a great place to come ask questions if you have questions about this build or other builds that we've talked about in the past, or even just stuff about like the upcoming map changes that are happening later this week, which we're excited about those as well. And finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us so we can keep making more PoE content, become a channel member or come boost our Discord. Thanks for watching. Bye.